It becomes dubbed as the Spanish flu. Well, at the time in the 1920s, they estimated that maybe 20 million had died.
Behind every scar in human history lies a disease that brought the world to its knees. Whether it was yellow fever, turning cities into ghost towns, Ebola, melting bodies from the inside out.
It attacks tissue around the body, basically attacks everything in the human body except for your bone.
Or the mysterious Cocoliztli, wiping out millions with no known cure. These weren't just illnesses, they were horror stories written in blood. Today we uncover the 20 most terrifying diseases in history. Spanish flu. This isn't your average history lesson. The Spanish flu of 1918 wasn't just a nasty bug going around. It was a worldwide killer that took out more lives than World War I. In just over a year, tens of millions were gone. It didn't target the weak, it went after the young and strong. This virus didn't come to play. It showed up in the spring of 1918 and spread like wildfire through military camps, cities, and remote villages. No one was safe. Soldiers returning from World War I unknowingly became walking biohazards, carrying the flu home with them. Within months, the virus had gone global. From the US to Europe, from Asia to Africa, people were dropping like flies. Unlike most flu strains that go after the elderly or young kids, this one targeted healthy people in their 20s and 30s. Their own immune systems overreacted, basically attacked their lungs, and caused them to suffocate. Some folks woke up fine in the morning and were dead by nightfall. Hospitals were overwhelmed, doctors had no treatment, and bodies stacked up faster than they could bury them. Antibiotics didn't exist yet, so if pneumonia kicked in, it was game over. Over 50 million lives lost. That's more than the Black Death in some estimates. For real, it was the deadliest flu ever recorded. Smallpox disease. This one didn't just kill, it left a mark. Literally. Smallpox wasn't some seasonal bug you could just shake off. This disease disfigured, blinded, and wiped out entire civilizations. So how did a virus become one of the most feared killers in human history? For starters, smallpox had no chill. Once it got into your system, it brought high fevers, body pain, and a brutal rash that turned into pus-filled sores. And those scars? Permanent. Survivors didn't just live, they carried the trauma on their faces forever. But that's only if they lived. This thing had a 30% death rate, and in some outbreaks, it was way higher. Smallpox was around for thousands of years. Pharaohs had it. The Aztecs were crushed by it. When Europeans brought it to the Americas, it didn't just kill, it shattered empires. By the 20th century, smallpox was still wrecking lives, killing about 300 million people just in that century alone. We fought back. In one of medicine's biggest W's, the world launched an insane global vaccine campaign. And in 1980, boom, declared eradicated, gone for good. Only 2 labs in the world still have samples. But yo, if that virus ever leaks, that's a level of chaos we're not ready for. Black Death. This wasn't just a disease, it was an apocalypse. The Black Death tore through Europe in the 1300s like a savage storm, leaving behind a death toll so massive it's still haunting history books. We're talking about one of the deadliest pandemics the world has ever seen, wiping out nearly half of Europe's population in just a few years. So, what was this killer? It was the bubonic plague, caused by a nasty little bacterium called Yersinia pestis, usually spread by fleas hitching rides on rats. Once it hit a town, it didn't just knock, it kicked the door down. People would go from healthy to death's door in a matter of days. High fever, chills, vomiting, and those infamous swollen lymph nodes called buboes turning black and oozing. Hence the name Black Death. And get this, back in the 1300s, folks had no clue what was going on. No real understanding of germs, and straight-up panic in the streets. Priests, doctors, and even entire families ditched each other just trying to stay alive. Dead bodies piled up so fast, they had to dig massive pits to dump them. Somewhere between 75 to 200 million people died worldwide. Ebola. Few viruses doesn't just scare doctors, it terrifies them. Ebola is the kind of virus that turns every outbreak into a full-blown crisis. It's fast, it's deadly, and when it hits, it doesn't hold back. First identified in 1976 near the Ebola River in what's now the Democratic Republic of Congo, the virus has caused multiple outbreaks across Central and West Africa. And every time it resurfaces, panic follows. Why? because Ebola kills up to 90% of those it infects, depending on the outbreak. The symptoms start off looking like a regular flu, fever, headache, muscle pain, but then it escalates fast. Vomiting, diarrhea, internal bleeding, and in severe cases, blood even leaking from eyes, nose, or gums. The body literally shuts down while the immune system goes into full meltdown mode. It spreads through direct contact with blood, sweat, vomit, or even the clothes of an infected person. People are still contagious after death. Yeah, even funeral practices can spark new chains of infection. The 2014 to 2016 West Africa outbreak was the deadliest yet. Over 11,000 lives lost. Hospitals were overwhelmed. It was a scene straight out of a disaster movie, except it was all too real. Flesh-eating disease. This one's straight up nightmarish. Necrotizing fasciitis, aka flesh-eating disease, doesn't just mess with you, it devours you from the inside out. And yeah, it's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. It starts with something as simple as a cut, a scrape, or even a bug bite. But if that wound gets hit with certain aggressive bacteria, like Group A Streptococcus, you're in serious trouble. This infection spreads lightning fast, destroying muscle, fat, and tissue like a wildfire under your skin. And we're not talking weeks or days. Sometimes it only takes hours before things go completely south. The pain? Out of this world. Doctors say it often feels way worse than the wound looks at first, which is one of the scariest signs. Then the swelling kicks in, your skin turns dark, you get fever, chills, and if treatment doesn't come fast, you're looking at sepsis, organ failure, or even death. Even with aggressive treatment, the survival rate isn't great. About 1 in 5 people don't make it. And those who do? Many end up losing limbs. A healthy person can go from fine to fighting for their life just because of one unlucky encounter with bacteria. Public pools, beaches, even gym equipment. It's rare, but when it hits hard. It's one of the most terrifying diseases out there. One tiny scratch, and your body could turn into a battlefield. Tuberculosis. This disease wasn't just deadly, it was everywhere. Tuberculosis, or TB, earned the nickname the White Plague for a reason. It swept through cities, drained the color from people's faces, and left millions gasping for air. TB is a bacterial infection that usually attacks the lungs, but it doesn't stop there. It can spread to the brain, spine, and other organs if left untreated. In the 1800s and early 1900s, it was the leading cause of death in the US. It didn't care about class, rich, poor, famous, unknown. TB took them all. People would cough for weeks, spit blood, drop weight like crazy, and just waste away slowly. It was brutal to watch, and even worse to live through. In overcrowded cities like New York, where people were packed into tight, poorly ventilated apartments, TB spread like wildfire. You could literally get it from a single cough in a crowded room. With no antibiotics back then, your best hope was to move to the mountains and get fresh air. By the mid-20th century, antibiotics finally brought tuberculosis under control, but it never left. Syphilis. STDs aren't all skin deep. Some go straight for the core. Syphilis is one of the oldest and most brutal. It didn't just eat away at your body, it attacked your brain, your heart, and your sanity. For centuries, it spread quietly, disguising itself with vague symptoms and tricking even the best doctors. Left untreated, it could turn you into a walking ghost, alive, but unraveling from the inside out. Syphilis starts off sneaky. First, you get a small, painless sore, easy to miss. Then, weeks later, skin rashes, fever, swollen glands. If you don't treat it, it goes quiet. For years, decades even. And when it comes back, that's when the real horror show starts. Late-stage syphilis is wild. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, syphilis was everywhere. Poets, politicians, royals. It took out some of the biggest names in history. And before penicillin came around in the 1940s, treatments were sketchy at best. Mercury rubs, weird herbal cures, none of it really worked. People were desperate, and it showed. Today, syphilis is treatable, if caught early. But don't get it twisted, it's making a comeback. Infections are rising again, and congenital syphilis, passed from mom to baby, is hitting hard in some places. HIV and AIDS. In the early 80s, something new and deadly hit, and it changed everything. HIV, the virus behind AIDS, didn't make a loud entrance. It crept in, silent and invisible, tearing down immune systems while people looked perfectly healthy. That's why it earned the nickname the silent killer. HIV goes straight for the body's defenses, attacking CD4 cells, the very ones that fight off infections. Over time, it weakens your immune system so badly that even a cold can turn fatal. When it progresses to AIDS, the smallest infections can become deadly. The body loses its ability to fight back at all. At first, the virus moved faster than science. People were dying and no one had answers. Patients were kicked out of hospitals, fired from jobs. It wasn't just a health crisis, it was a human rights disaster. By the time the world caught up, HIV had already gone global. Since then, it's taken more than 36 million lives. That's more than tragic. It's one of the deadliest pandemics in history. But here's the twist. Science hit back. Antiretroviral treatments can now suppress the virus to the point where it's undetectable and untransmittable. People with HIV can live full, healthy lives. Still, it's not a cure, and millions around the world still don't have access to the meds that could save them. Even now, millions are living with HIV, and some don't even know it. That's what makes it so terrifying. You can carry it for years without symptoms, unknowingly passing it on. Malaria. You think the deadliest animals are sharks or snakes? Nah, the real killer is the mosquito and the disease it carries. Malaria. This microscopic parasite has been haunting humanity for thousands of years, and it's still out here taking names. Malaria isn't just a tropical illness. It's a full-blown health crisis that affects over 240 million people every single year. It's totally preventable and treatable, yet it still kills over 600,000 people annually. Most of them, kids under 5. That's the part that really hits hard. So, how does it work? One infected mosquito bite and that parasite slips into your bloodstream. Then the chaos begins. Fever, chills, body aches, vomiting, and fatigue that hits like a truck. What's really messed up is how normal it's become in certain parts of the world. In regions like sub-Saharan Africa, it's just part of life. Over the years, we've developed anti-malarial drugs and mosquito control tactics. But here's the shocker. The parasite keeps evolving. Drug resistance is growing, and mosquitoes are adapting. Yellow fever. It doesn't just sound old school, it is old school. But don't get it twisted. This disease earned its place in history as one of the most terrifying killers ever. Passed on by mosquitoes, it spreads fast, strikes hard, and kills ugly. The early symptoms feel like the flu, fever, chills, muscle pain, but then the second phase hits, and that's when it goes off the rails. We're talking jaundice, liver failure, bleeding from the eyes and mouth, and the worst part, black vomit. Yeah, it's called vomito negro, and it means your insides are literally breaking down. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, yellow fever outbreaks straight up wiped out entire cities. Body carts rolling through the streets. People were dying so fast no one could keep up with the burials. It was chaos. And for decades, nobody knew how it spread. Some blamed bad air. Others thought it was person to person. Turns out it was mosquitoes. Again, one tiny bite and boom, you could be dead in a week. Even now it's no joke. The disease still hits parts of Africa and South America hard. And while there is a vaccine, not everyone has access to it.
Let's dive in. It's finally time for the open discussion.
Think today's viruses are scary? Take a look at history's creepiest diseases, like the horrific conditions that distorted people's faces. How would you react if someone you knew suddenly looked like this? Could you handle the fear, or would it haunt your dreams forever? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to mention #OpenDiscussion. Typhus. It doesn't roll in with drama. It sneaks in on your clothes, your skin, your hair, thanks to tiny parasites like lice and fleas. And once it hits, it doesn't just make you sick. It can wipe out entire armies, crush cities, and leave mass graves in its path. This disease has been around for centuries, usually showing up when things are already at rock bottom. Wars, famines, overcrowded prisons. The bacteria spread when infected lice poop on your skin. And if that gets into a scratch or bite, game over. Fever, chills, headaches, muscle pain, and then that brutal rash that spreads fast. If untreated, typhus can cause pneumonia, brain swelling, kidney failure, and death. During World War I alone, typhus killed 3 million people in Eastern Europe. And it didn't stop there. In Nazi concentration camps during World War II, typhus ran wild. Overcrowding, starvation, filth. It was the perfect storm for this disease to thrive. Even Anne Frank died from it. That's how deep typhus runs in history's darkest moments. Nowadays, antibiotics can treat it, but that's only if you catch it in time. In places with poor sanitation or war-torn conditions, typhus is still lurking. It might not make modern headlines, but don't be fooled. This disease still knows how to kill. Lassa fever. This deadly disease is a ticking time bomb hiding in plain sight, mostly in West Africa, and it's got all the makings of a full-blown nightmare. Caused by the Lassa virus, this illness spreads through contact with food or household items contaminated by rodent urine or feces, specifically from the multi-mamate rat, a virus passed from rats to humans that can trigger internal bleeding, multi-organ failure, and death. It infects around 300,000 people every year, with thousands of them not making it out alive. At first, symptoms seem chill, fever, weakness, headache. But then, in severe cases, things get real ugly. For pregnant women, the fatality rate can hit up to 80% in the third trimester. That's straight up terrifying. There's no widely available vaccine yet, and treatment options are limited. Naegleria fowleri. This one's pure nightmare fuel. Naegleria fowleri, better known as the brain-eating amoeba, sounds made up, but it's terrifyingly real. It's not spread by bites, food, or blood. You can get it just by swimming in warm, fresh water. One splash up the nose, and it's game on. Yeah, this tiny terror lives in warm freshwater, lakes, hot springs, even poorly maintained pools. One wrong dive, and if water shoots up your nose, that amoeba can sneak in and travel straight to your brain. Once it's in, it causes a brutal, fast-moving brain infection called primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, or PAM. Symptoms start off like a regular illness, headache, fever, nausea. But within days, things go south fast. Confusion, seizures, hallucinations, and then coma. Most victims die within a week. Over 97% of known cases are fatal. It's one of the deadliest infections on Earth, and there's no guaranteed cure. It's super rare. Only a few cases pop up each year, mostly in the US South during summer. But when it hits hard. We're talking healthy kids or teens going for a swim and ending up in the ICU days later. There have been some experimental treatments and a few miracle survivors, but that doesn't make this thing any less terrifying. You don't drink it, you don't feel it, and by the time symptoms show up, it's usually too late. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Bizarre and terrifying. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease isn't caused by a virus or bacteria. It's triggered by prions. These rogue proteins invade the brain, twist normal proteins into their warped shape, and leave behind holes that make brain tissue look like Swiss cheese. It's rare, but when it strikes, it's fast, brutal, and always fatal. CJD is rare, but when it hits hard. It starts with memory problems and mood changes, but within weeks, it spirals into full-blown dementia, muscle spasms, blindness, and total loss of control. Most people die within a year. No mercy and barely any warning. That's what makes it so scary. And get this, there's a version linked to eating contaminated beef, known as variant CJD, or the human form of mad cow disease. That's right, eating the wrong burger could lead to your brain melting down. It sounds like sci-fi, but this actually happened in the UK in the 90s. Dozens died after eating infected meat. What makes this disease next level terrifying is how it spreads in hospitals. Prions aren't killed by normal sterilization. If surgical tools get contaminated, they could unknowingly pass it to the next patient. The brain of a CJD victim looks like it's been shredded, full of holes, like a sponge. And since there's no real treatment or way to stop it, doctors can only sit back and watch as the brain shuts down piece by piece. Rabies' few things are more terrifying than a virus that turns the brain against itself. Rabies does exactly that. Once symptoms show up, it's basically a death sentence. Survival is almost non-existent at that stage. It starts with something simple, a bite or scratch from an infected animal, usually a dog, bat, raccoon, or fox. The virus then makes its way through your nerves, heading straight for your brain, and it moves slowly, sometimes taking weeks to show signs. But once it does, it's game over. At first, you'll feel flu-like symptoms, fever, chills, fatigue. But then things turn dark. Extreme anxiety, hallucinations, muscle spasms, uncontrollable aggression, and a haunting fear of water. That's right, just trying to swallow water causes choking and panic. They call it hydrophobia, and it's one of rabies' signature horrors. Once the virus reaches the brain, it triggers acute inflammation and rapidly leads to coma and death. Even today, with all our modern medicine, almost no one survives once neurological symptoms start. The few who did are medical miracles, and even they had to go through hell. Rabies is preventable. A vaccine given right after exposure can save your life, but only if it's done fast. Miss that window, and there's nothing doctors can do. In parts of the world where vaccines and animal control are limited, rabies still claims thousands of lives every year, mostly children. That's what makes it even worse. It's one of the most painful ways to die, and yet it's so avoidable. Russian flu. Before COVID-19, before even the Spanish flu, there was the Russian flu, a pandemic that slammed the globe in 1889 and left a trail of chaos, fear, and death. And here's the shocking part. This might have been the first modern pandemic we ever saw, but barely anyone talks about it. The Russian flu kicked off in the city of Bukhara, then part of the Russian Empire, and spread fast. Within months, it had hit Europe, North America, and Asia like wildfire. Trains and ships helped it move quick. And once it landed in big cities, hospitals were overwhelmed and death tolls skyrocketed. People experienced sudden chills, fever, fatigue, and intense body pain. Some victims reportedly had brain inflammation, nerve damage, and long-term effects that eerily resemble what we now call long COVID. At the time, they thought it was just another strain of influenza, but modern scientists have been digging into old medical records, and there's now a theory that the Russian flu wasn't flu at all. It might have been the first coronavirus pandemic. Some believe it was a version of OC43, a human coronavirus still circulating today, but way more aggressive back then. Death estimates vary, but it's believed over 1 million people lost their lives. For the 19th century, that was a massive blow. It came in waves, just like COVID. The first one was bad, but the second and third were even worse. Influenza pandemic. In 1957, the world got blindsided by a killer flu that didn't knock. It kicked the door in. The 1957 to 1958 influenza pandemic, better known as the Asian flu, swept across continents and took more than 1 million lives with it. It all started in southern China when a brand new strain of the H2N2 influenza virus popped up, created by a wild mix of human and avian flu genes. Within weeks, it spread to Hong Kong, then Japan, and before anyone could blink, it was making its way across Europe and the US. The symptoms? Brutal. High fever, body pain, sore throat, chills. Basically the flu on beast mode. What made it even more shocking was how fast it moved through schools, military bases, and workplaces. In the US alone, about 70,000 people died, with the elderly and the very young taking the hardest hit. Hospitals were slammed. Entire cities were dealing with staff shortages. Some businesses had to shut down just because too many people were sick to show up. It was one of the first times scientists were able to identify and create a vaccine mid-outbreak. It helped, but not fast enough to prevent the wave of deaths that followed. Still, it was a wake-up call that pandemics don't need war or poverty to explode. They just need a virus with the right mix. Antonine Plague. Long before modern medicine and lab tests, there was a plague so deadly it nearly crushed the Roman Empire. The Antonine Plague hit in 165 AD, and to this day, nobody knows exactly what it was. Smallpox? Measles? Something worse? What we do know is this: it was devastating. It all started when Roman soldiers returned from campaigns in the East, unknowingly carrying a deadly disease back with them. Once it reached the empire's cities, it tore through the population like wildfire. At its peak, the plague was killing up to 2,000 people per day in Rome alone. That's not just a health crisis, that's collapse-level chaos. The symptoms were terrifying: high fever, sore throat, diarrhea, and a nasty skin rash that scabbed over and scarred survivors for life, if they survived. Entire families were wiped out, towns were left empty, and even the mighty Roman army couldn't hold the front lines. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius watched his empire fall apart, then eventually died from the disease himself. It's estimated that the Antonine Plague killed around 5 million people, including a huge chunk of the Roman military and leadership. Cocoliztli epidemics. This one wiped out millions, and we still don't fully know what it was. The Cocoliztli epidemics were a series of brutal outbreaks that hit 16th century Mexico like a wrecking ball, killing up to 80% of the native population. It started around 1545, just a few decades after the Spanish arrived. Native communities were already struggling under colonial rule, but then came Cocoliztli, a name that literally means pestilence in Nahuatl. Victims suffered from high fevers, blackened tongues, severe bleeding from the eyes, mouth, and nose, and organ failure. People were dying within days. What made it extra terrifying? It wasn't smallpox, measles, or anything the Europeans recognized. Recent studies suggest it might have been a form of salmonella, but nobody's 100% sure. And since it hit indigenous people way harder than the Spanish, some believe a deadly combo of drought, starvation, forced labor, and foreign pathogens turned it into the perfect storm. By the time the second wave hit in 1576, the death toll had reached nearly 15 million. Entire villages vanished. It wasn't just a health crisis, it was cultural extinction on a massive scale. Historians now rank Cocoliztli among the worst epidemics ever, yet hardly anyone outside academic circles talks about it. It changed the course of Mexican history, collapsed native societies, and helped the Spanish tighten their grip. Third plague pandemic. You've heard of the Black Death, but did you know the plague came back again in the 1800s and kept killing into the 1900s? The third plague pandemic was the final blow in history's deadliest trilogy, and it still managed to wipe out over 12 million people across the globe. This wasn't just a repeat, it was a global disaster. It kicked off in 1855 in China's Yunnan province and quickly spread through Asia, hitting Hong Kong and Bombay especially hard. With busy trade routes and crowded port cities, the plague hopped continents, landing in Africa, the Americas, and even Australia. The killer? Still Yersinia pestis, the same bacteria that caused the Black Death centuries earlier. Carried by fleas on rats, it triggered outbreaks of both bubonic and pneumonic plague. One spread through the body, the other through the air. Both were deadly and fast. Victims developed massive swollen lymph nodes, coughed up blood, and died in days. Entire neighborhoods were quarantined. Panic spread faster than the bacteria itself. In some cities, death tolls were so high that funeral services couldn't keep up, and bodies piled up in the open. But this pandemic wasn't just about horror, it was also a turning point. Scientists finally discovered the real source of the plague: fleas on rats. That breakthrough, plus better sanitation and modern medicine, helped bring it under control. But it took decades. The World Health Organization didn't declare it over until 1960. Thanks for watching. If you made it through without getting too creeped out, don't forget to like, subscribe, and wash your hands, just in case. See you in the next one.